You didn't stop doing things because you chose to stop. You just stopped offering. The hike suggestions, the late dinners, the weekend plans. Somewhere in the last few years, you let someone else take the lead. You told yourself you were being wiser with your energy, and maybe you believed it. Your liver produces something every cell in your body needs to make energy. By your 60s, that production line has been quietly slowing for decades. Almost no standard test measures it. But here's what the research is now showing. That quiet retreat from life, the kind with no dramatic cause and no obvious name, may not be about age at all. In some people over 60, it traces back to the liver. Not liver disease in the way most people picture it. Something much subtler. Changes in how the liver produces energy, manages oxidative stress, and sends signals to the rest of the body. Changes that a standard metabolic panel almost never catches. We are going to look at 3 specific ways aging affects liver function, and how those changes can create a whole body energy shortage that shows up as fatigue, brain fog, and a general sense of dimness. Not because your age is the problem, because something in your biology may have shifted, and that is a different kind of problem entirely. One that actually has a starting point. Stay with me, because the third mechanism is the one most people never hear about, and it may be the most actionable thing we cover today. She was a project manager, 63 years old, the kind of person who arrived first and left last, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely wanted to be there. Then, gradually, she stopped standing at her desk. She used to choose standing. It was a small habit that said something about how she moved through her day. One morning, she realized she hadn't stood at that desk in months. She hadn't decided to sit. She had just stopped deciding to stand. The meetings that once energized her became things to get through. Evening calls she would have taken without thinking, she started letting go to voicemail. She told herself she was being more selective. She reframed the retreat as wisdom. She wasn't being wiser, she was running low. Most people believe that if something were genuinely wrong with their liver, a blood test would catch it. Sit with that for a moment. Because that belief, reasonable as it sounds, is where the confusion begins. Standard liver enzymes measure damage. They are not designed to measure declining function. A liver can be losing metabolic efficiency for years and return numbers that look, on paper, perfectly normal. I want to say this carefully, not to alarm anyone, but actually I do want to alarm you slightly. Because the gap between your tests are normal and your liver is functioning optimally is wider than most people realize. Those are 2 different statements. There is another pattern worth recognizing. A 61-year-old woman, someone who organized the weekend hikes, drove everyone to the trail, packed the sandwiches without being asked, stopped suggesting. She would still go if others organized it. She told herself she was letting the younger ones lead. What she had actually lost was the initiative. Packing a day bag, a task that once gave her quiet satisfaction, had started to feel like too many steps. Her panel came back normal too. Most people who notice these changes don't connect them to their liver. Researchers who spent years studying this population found that roughly 4 in 10 adults over 60 in the United States have measurable changes in liver fat accumulation, most without any awareness of it. 4 in 10. That is not a rare condition. That is the person in the next seat. Separately, people with these liver changes report higher rates of fatigue, anxiety, and depression compared to the general population. The fatigue has a name. The name just isn't showing up on the standard report. The version of yourself that made plans on a Wednesday for the weekend, the one who offered to drive, pack, organize, that person didn't disappear. The question is whether the biology caught up with you first. But here's what standard panels don't show, and what most people never find out until they look for it. The liver is not just a detox organ. That framing is decades out of date. Think of it less like a filter and more like a central distribution hub, one that manufactures critical compounds, packages them, and ships them to every other system in your body. When the hub slows, the whole supply chain feels it. And 3 specific processes slow with age in ways that matter enormously to how you feel. The first is a molecule called NAD+, and I'll explain what that means in plain terms in just a moment. Most of your tissues, your muscles, your brain, your heart, cannot produce NAD+ from scratch. They depend on the liver to manufacture it and release it into circulation. NAD+ is the molecule your cells use to convert food into usable energy. Without adequate supply, how well your cells produce energy begins to decline. Think of NAD+ like the electrical current in a building. The liver is the substation. If the substation starts producing less current, every floor in the building gets a little dimmer. No single room goes dark. The whole building just runs quieter. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania found that the liver's role in NAD+ metabolism is so central that restoring NAD+ supply specifically to liver cells replicated the full body benefits of broader supplementation. The fatigue you feel in your legs on a Tuesday afternoon may be originating in a process your liver manages, not in your legs at all. The second mechanism is the depletion of something called glutathione, the body's master antioxidant, and the liver holds the highest concentration of it. Glutathione is what the liver uses to neutralize the damaging byproducts of normal metabolism. Think of it as the smoke extractor running constantly in the background. In younger years, production keeps pace with demand. After 60, the rate at which the liver synthesizes it begins to fall. When researchers at Baylor College of Medicine compared adults in their 30s with adults in their 60s and 70s, they found that the older group's livers were producing substantially less glutathione, and markers of cellular damage were measurably higher. What does that mean in a day? It means the liver is spending its resources on damage control instead of production. The body is managing its own exhaust rather than generating forward momentum. The third mechanism is the one most people never hear about: bile acids. The liver produces them from cholesterol, and for most of medical history, they were understood primarily as digestive aids. That understanding is now well out of date. Bile acids are long-distance signaling molecules. They travel from the liver through the gut and into the bloodstream, where they reach the brain, the muscles, and energy-managing tissue throughout the body. Their job, in part, is to help the body switch between fuel sources, from sugar to fat, from rest to activity. Researchers now call this capacity metabolic flexibility. When bile acid composition shifts with age, and it does shift reliably, that flexibility decreases. The body becomes, in a practical sense, less able to change gears. You may recognize that as the heaviness after lunch, the afternoon that never quite recovers. This is not a coincidence. It is a mechanism. The global prevalence of liver fat accumulation increased by more than 50% between 1990 and 2019, and it continues to climb. That is not a statistic about other people. That is a trend running through the exact demographic watching this video. And here's the thing about all three of these mechanisms: the decline in NAD+ production, the drop in glutathione, the shift in bile acid signaling. None of them will show up on a routine metabolic panel. None. The tests weren't designed to find them. The fatigue that feels like the proof you're getting old may actually be the signal that your liver, not your age, needs attention. And that is the better news, because livers, unlike birthdays, can change. If you are in your 60s or 70s, and the fatigue everyone keeps telling you is normal does not feel normal to you, if something in what you just heard sounds more accurate than anything your last appointment produced, you are not imagining it, and you are not alone. Subscribe and I will keep showing up. Which raises the question that really matters. If the liver is where this started, is that also where it can be reversed? The clearest sign of the change wasn't something she felt in herself. It was her daughter's voice on the phone saying, "You seem like you again." She hadn't told anyone anything had changed. He was 67. He used to build furniture on weekends. Small pieces, careful work, the kind of hobby that requires sustained attention and the patience to start something you won't finish quickly. Somewhere over 2 or 3 years, he stopped going into the garage. The tools were still there. He would walk in, look around, and leave. He told his wife he had lost interest. He hadn't lost interest, he had lost the fuel to begin. Several months into a protocol focused specifically on liver support, he found himself in the garage at 7 in the morning on a Saturday, without planning it, without deciding to. A small bookshelf half-built by noon. He noticed it not in himself, but in his wife's face when he came in for lunch, covered in sawdust. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That detail, noticing the change in someone else's reaction before you feel it yourself, I find that one difficult to move past quickly. It keeps coming up in the patterns I see. The body communicates its recovery outward before the person inside recognizes it. The liver's biology responds to targeted input more readily than most people expect. The amino acids glycine and cysteine, both found in food and available as dietary supplements, are the building blocks the liver needs to produce glutathione. When Baylor College of Medicine researchers gave elderly subjects these two amino acids, markers of cellular damage fell within 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That is not a long timeline for a biology problem to begin responding. Dietary patterns that reduce liver fat, lower refined carbohydrate intake, adequate protein, and time-restricted eating in some populations have shown measurable effects on liver fat within weeks to months in clinical research. Certain NAD+ precursor compounds are also being actively studied for their ability to restore the liver's energy production capacity. None of this is a cure. None of this is a promise. What it is, a starting point with actual coordinates. If you are sitting with this right now and thinking about the last time you felt like yourself, I want you to write something down. Not a supplement, not a protocol. 4 markers worth asking your doctor to run: ALT, AST, GGT, and ferritin. If access allows, a liver ultrasound. That is where the picture starts to get specific. This is not about getting younger. That framing helps no one. It is about recovering access to energy that was always yours, that your biology redirected, without your knowledge, toward problems it was quietly managing. The interest in the garage was always there. The version of you who made the plans was always there. The question was never who you were. The question was what your liver was running on. If this gave you something, a new way to look at what your body has been telling you, a reason to pay closer attention, subscribe to this channel. New research, real context, no noise. I will be here consistently. You already knew something wasn't adding up. You just needed someone to take it seriously.